final prophet and messenger sent to all humans and jinn, and he is truthful about everything that he conveyed of the revelation. Thereafter, we remind ourselves to have the sincere intention for the sake of Allah in attending this session of Islamic knowledge, because having the sincere intention is the requirement to get the reward. So the Muslim, whenever he does a good deed, he has to have the sincere intention for the sake of Allah to get rewarded for that good deed. The reward is defined as the compensation that the Muslim receives in the hereafter for the good deeds that he did in this life among what makes him happy. An example of the reward that is guaranteed to the righteous Muslim in the grave is that his grave is expanded approximately 105 feet by 105 feet, and his grave is illuminated with a light similar to the light of the full moon, and the fragrance of paradise will be present in the grave. The sincere intention means for the Muslim to do the good deed, seeking the acceptance of Allah only, and not the praise of the people. So Alhamdulillah, we're grateful to Allah that we have been guided to Al-Islam, which is the greatest endowment, the greatest blessing, because it is through Al-Islam that we will be able to enter paradise. It is through Al-Islam that the accountable person, the accountable Muslim, the hereafter, he will be eligible for mercy. And so Islam is the opener of paradise. It is the key to paradise. And we are grateful and thankful to Allah that we have been guided to have access to the connected information, the connected chains of narration that are leading back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because that is the only way to ensure and guarantee that we have the proper information. Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's the one who received the revelation, and that information that we need, the information pertaining to morals and ethics and right versus wrong and good versus evil, and what is praise and what is dispraise and what is beautiful and what is ugly, all of that can only be known through the revelation. And it's not something that is not something that the person can use their mind to come to a conclusion for it. Subhanallah. And this is much needed nowadays. So we got a couple things left to mention for the sins of the private parts. We got to urinate in a mosque, even if done in a container or on a revered object. So when we say mosque, we're referring to a specific place that is through an Islamic process. There's a specific Islamic process that is done that makes that place called a mosque, or makes that place have the judgment of a mosque. And so what is that process? Very simple. Basically, there would be a Muslim who either owns a building or land, and that Muslim would say, let's say in Arabic, he would say, for example, وقفت هذه الأرض مسجدا, for example. So he would say that he now dedicates this land to be a mosque. So once he says that, once he fulfills the religious process, immediately that land is no longer his personal property. So immediately that land becomes what he dedicated it to be. So if he dedicated to be, let's say, a masjid, then it becomes a masjid right away. So that land becomes a masjid, and the judgment of a masjid now applies to that land, and it is no longer the property of that Muslim. So now it belongs to the Muslim nation at large. So now it's property of the Muslims, period. And the Muslims are now the ones who can, and the ones who have a right over it, but not any particular individual Muslim, not any one Muslim. It belongs to all the Muslims. So this is what is called, and when that process is done, that's what's called a masjid. And that's what the judgment that we're talking about here applies to that. Um, and why is that important to understand and why is that important to know? Because there's certain things that apply only to the masjid, certain things that are forbidden to do inside the masjid that are allowed to be done, let's say, in other than a masjid. Um, so this is important for us. Why? Because what we do, like for example, in many countries, is there'll be some Muslims, they get together, they see a building, they see a place, they get together, they get money together, they for example purchase that place or rent that place, etc., and then they use it to pray the prayers there, they use it to give lessons there, they use it to, let's say, have a school there. They use it for Eid. They use it for, teaching Quran and anything related to Islam and benefiting the Muslims, right? So it can be used, some Muslims, for example, might get married there. Some Muslims, for example, they might, share their happy moments, occasions, etc., by gathering in that place. And they might call it a masjid. They might, for example, have the sign outside Masjid Omar, for example, Masjid Abu Bakr, Masjid Ahl Sunnah, right? They have the name Masjid something something. But in reality, it wouldn't have the judgment of a masjid like what we're talking about here for this case. So remember, like for example, we mentioned in the earlier classes when we were going over the earlier parts of the book, um, when if a woman, let's say she's on her period and she cannot, let's say, walk into a mosque and stay there. She has to avoid it, just avoid staying in the mosque because she's on her period. Um, so that applies to the masjid. But if it was a place like the one I described just now, um, like it was a place that was bought and it was rented or whatever, and those Muslims they used it for different things. They prayed in it, they did activities in it. That place, for example, even though they called it a masjid, even though they have the sign outside that says masjid, um, the woman who has her period, she can still go inside of it and she can still sit inside. So we call those places that they don't have this special judgment of the masjid. We call those places musalla. So, you call it a musalla. So this judgment here about urinating inside the mosque, it doesn't apply to the musalla. So if someone's in the musalla, then they can, urinate inside of it, meaning like within within the boundaries of it. they can urinate within the boundaries of the musalla, and it would be permissible. But if it was a masjid, if it was truly a masjid, like we mentioned, has that special judgment because they went through the religious process to make it a masjid, then within the boundaries of that masjid, they cannot urinate, even if it's done in a container, because then that would be a sin of the private part. And uh for urinating on a revered object, here it's referring to like if someone وَالْعِيَاذُ billah, and if they did this knowingly, of course it would be blasphemous. Like for example, someone urinates on an Islamic book or an Islamic paper or some paper that has an honored name or the Quran, na'udhu billah. If someone does that, of course, it's blasphemy. And since they did it, yani they urinated on that revered object, then it's categorized under the sins of the private parts. So that is what it's referring to there. And of course, subhanAllah, any person that does that is, uh, an evil person. And for sure, they are committing blasphemy by that. Because to belittle something that's honored Islamically, that is blasphemy. Um, Now, among the issues or among the judgments that are specific to the mosque is that it is forbidden to bring inside of the mosque any filth that the person is not sure or feels safe that it wouldn't contaminate the mosque. And it's also forbidden for the person to enter the mosque if he has filth on his body or he has like a wound that he fears that he will stain the mosque with it or contaminate the mosque with it. But if he doesn't fear that he would dirty the mosque with that filth, then it's not forbidden. And it is not uh, disliked to walk in the mosque with clean sandals. Um, this is due to what has been narrated from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he prayed with his sandals on. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did that to show the permissibility. And it's also permissible to enter the mosque um, with a sandal that has some filth on its bottom, but it's dry, and that it will not contaminate the mosque, with the condition that the person does not step on a spot that has moisture or wetness, and with the condition that there would be no dirtying of the carpet or the mats or the like that is placed on the floor of the mosque. No. Any questions about that before moving on to the next one? The last one that'll be mentioned for sins of the private parts, then we'll move on to sins of the foot. طيب. The last one to mention for sins of the private parts is for an adult to neglect circumcision, but it is allowed according to Al-Imam Malik. So among the sins of the private parts is to leave out circumcision after pubescence, because it is an obligation upon the accountable to circumcise if they can bear it. And this occurs by cutting the prepuce of the penis, and the skin that's covering the penis head. And it is an obligation according to Al-Imam Shaafi'i uh, to do the circumcision also, yani, for males and females. For Imam Shafi'i, it's an obligation upon males and females. So for the woman, well, the part that is cut for the circumcision is there is, yeah, or what they call the clitoral hood. It's just a little part of it. So not the actual clit itself, not the actual clitoris itself. What is cut would be like part of her clitoral hood. Now the madhab of Imam Malik and others of the Imams, they say circumcision is not an obligation upon the males or the females, rather it's sunnah. And so from this aspect, we should be gentle, or gentleness, or I guess, yani, not being strict about this. That should occur with whoever embraces al-Islam who is not circumcised. So he should not be spoken to about this if it is feared that he would be repelled from Islam. So this is something that a very important concept that, mashallah, the scholars of Islam, this is commonly known amongst them, that they take care of these matters, they take care of these issues, and it's something that it is following the rules of the religion. It is following the rules of the religion, because in Islam there's a rule that says that um when there's a situation where there's two harmful matters and one is worse than the other, you avoid the one that's worse. So this is called the lesser of two harms. The lesser of two harms. So basically, let's say in like this scenario, take this scenario specifically. You have someone who just embraced Islam, someone who just became Muslim. This is something new for them. This is uncharted territory for them. Of course, the most important thing that they could do is become Muslim, and that's the biggest um obligation, right? The biggest obligation is to be Muslim. So we want that person to avoid blasphemy. We want that person to never blaspheme. We want that person to stay Muslim. And if you, or if someone, for example, presents to them something, like for example, he tells them, "Oh, look, according to a Shafi'i, you have to get circumcised." And this person is, let's say, you know, 30 years old, 25 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old. They lived their whole life without being circumcised. They, obviously it wasn't their fault. When they were born, their parents didn't do it. Uh, but now you're telling this, let's say, grown man that he'll be committing a sin if he doesn't get circumcised. Which the fact of the matter is that it's true, according to a Shafi'i. But according to Imam Malik, he won't be committing a sin. So really, In this case, there's really no need to tell him that, according to a Shafi'i, he's obligated to. Now, there's no need to tell him without prompting. If he asks, if he says, "Hey, I read on the internet this and that. Do I have to do this?" Then you explain the case and you tell him, according to the Imam Shafi'i, this is the judgment. According to the Imam Malik, this is the judgment. So it's up to you. But you won't be, let's say, a sinful Muslim if you go according to Imam Malik. You won't be. And Imam Shafi'i won't judge you as an enormous sinner if you follow Imam Malik, because you have, there's that valid difference of opinion Islamically. So that scenario, yeah, you can have that conversation, but you don't come straight away to the new Muslim and say, "Hey, guess what? You're obligated to get circumcised, or else you're gonna be a sinner." Because what's gonna happen, and if there's the shaitan working against him, there's his own nets working against him, there's society and other people and the propaganda of the world and all that working against a person. So you don't want the person to get repelled from Islam, because he might, for example, what might be his reaction, because he's ignorant, because he's not yet he hasn't become, let's say, um used to, right, being Muslim. He hasn't become integrated yet into the Islamic culture. So what might happen is he might belittle it, he might contradict it, he might talk against it, he might say, "Oh, this is weird," or something like that, and he'll blaspheme. He'll commit blasphemy, and that's worse, right? Than, even if it were the case, like it was by consensus forbidden. Committing blasphemy is worse than just committing a sin that's not blasphemy. So this is one of those cases where, and this applies to many things. This applies to many things. Imagine, right, you're talking to someone about Islam and you got them to embrace that Islam. So you feel out the situation. Is this person like motivated? Is this person eager? Is this person dedicated? Is this person, for example, have the bandwidth to, carry this information that you're about to give them? And so you tell them, "Oh, now you have to learn how to make wudu. Now you have to learn how to pray, etc." So you gauge that situation. If you feel like they're a person that would get overwhelmed, if you tell them that right away, you don't tell them right away. That's right. You don't tell them right away. It could be like half an hour left of dhuhr, and technically now, because they embrace Islam and because they're accountable and they embrace Islam, now they're obligated to pray. But if you tell them right now, like let's say you're like just like at the school library, or you were like at your job or whatever, like you're in a place now where it's not the setting where you can go and teach them how to make wudu, or that person, for example, if you tell them, "All right, let's go right now and make wudu," he might get overwhelmed. So you just leave it alone. You leave it alone until little by little you teach the person, etc., etc., etc. That's that's the proper way. So the same thing with like the circumcision is, according to a Shafi'i, it's an obligation. According to Imam Malik, is sunnah. So you don't, let's say, bring it up or say something to the new Muslim about it, and in a way that would cause him to be repelled. So you have to use wisdom. And this applies to other judgments as well, but here the Shaykh mentions it with the circumcision. And circumcision, it helps to fulfill the lifting of the major ritual impurity, the janaba, because the skin, if it was covering the head of the penis, the water would not reach it easily. Because this skin, it is like stuck to or yani, stuck to the head of the penis. And sometimes that place is contaminated with urine if the person is not circumcised. So basically, there's many benefits to circumcision. It's cleaner. It helps the Muslim to, when he makes ghusl, it'll be easier. Because if he's not circumcised, then the male Muslim, when he makes ghusl, he has to make sure that he peels back the foreskin so that he can make sure that he washes the head when he's making the obligatory bath. And also, last thing for this is that there's a misconception. Some people think that the circumcision regarding the female, they think that it's what some ignorant people do in some countries where, they sew up the woman's vaginal opening or they completely remove her clitoris, which is mutilation, and this is not per permissible in Islam. This is not the circumcision that we're talking about. What we're talking about is just cutting a little bit off of the clitoral hood, not the clit itself. Subhanallah. طيب, now we're moving on to sins of the foot. So the author said, among the sins of the foot are to walk to commit a sin, such as walking to accuse a Muslim falsely before a ruler or walking to kill them unrightfully. The absconding. Basically in this case, yani, any walking to commit a sin uh is considered a sin of the foot. So the Muslim who he goes to uh let's say he's going to a bar. He's going to a bar. His intention is to drink alcohol. So, and he made his intention. He's heading towards the bar. So every step that he takes is a sin. Or let's say, for example, this Muslim, he is going to kill another Muslim unjustly. So every step that he takes towards that is a sin. Here he mentions walking to accuse a Muslim falsely before a ruler, which means, like in the past, for example, you go to when there was a Islamic infrastructure, if someone went to the Muslim ruler and they mentioned something to them about another Muslim, and so then um, that ruler would take that Muslim and do something to him because of the one who told him or the one who went to the ruler. He's like someone that's close to the ruler or someone that has influence with the ruler or someone that has power or whatever. You know how it is like with certain types of corruption is that if you know someone that's in power and you ask them to do this or you ask them to do that and you tell them to do this, they'll do it. And because they know you or because they whatever you work with them, etc. So if that person he goes to that ruler, he tells them, oh, so and so did such and such, then that ruler, what he's gonna do, he's gonna, let's say, flog him or imprison him or do something or take his money. Um, so that it'll be harming that other Muslim. So to walk to accuse a Muslim of something unjust, like something false, so that the ruler could do something to him, this is something that is forbidden, and a sin of the foot, and he gets a sin for each step that he takes, and it applies to any sin that the Muslim is walking towards that sin to commit that sin. It applies to any sin. The next one is the absconding of a slave, a wife, or one who owes a right to others. such as a prosecution, a debt, obligatory expenditures, dutifulness to one's parents, or child rearing. So absconding means like abandoning. So anyone, let's say, who has a right over you, you can't run away from them. You can't run away from that right. So the first example is the slave. So the slave cannot run away from his slave master. Um, like he can't like escape. Like we're talking about in the proper or the valid slavery, not the invalid slavery. Of course, if someone is a free man and then they get kidnapped and abducted, and then they get treated like a slave, etc., then that free man, he's still a free man that's just been kidnapped and unjustly imprisoned. So the first chance that he gets, he can leave. He can run away and he can save himself. That's fine. We're talking about when a person is actually a legitimate slave, validly owned by the owner, then in that case he cannot run away. The same thing for the wife. Subhanallah. This is a big time calamity that happens nowadays. And it used to happen in the past too, but nowadays it can happen faster. Nowadays it can happen uh in a way that that man he would be devastated. So let's talk about it. What happens is, let's say there is a woman, yeah, a Muslim woman that she got married to the guy. Maybe let's say she had different intentions, right? Let's say she perceived that guy to be this, or she perceived that guy to be that. Um, let's say that not exactly were the principles that we're supposed to use as a basis for choosing our spouse. Let's say that that female Muslim, she didn't use those principles. She basically was like, okay, he's got money, or oh, he, for example, is of a certain social status, or whatever. Yeah, she based her decision to become the spouse on a certain criteria that's not Islamic. She basically she was going into the marriage for something. But she willingly went into the marriage. So it's not like she blindly went into the marriage. So she willingly went into the marriage. But then let's say once she got married and then like she got to experience this person up close and she realized, this is not what I want, right? This is not, for example, the person I thought that this person was, or the image that this person projected, or for example, the if she was in it for the money, then she realized, oh, there's no money, right? The amount of money that is perceived that this person has is way less than what they actually have, for example. So now what does she want? She wants to leave. She wants out of the marriage. So what can she do? She cannot run away. She can't, for example, say, hey, uh, I'm gonna go visit my friend, I'll be right back. And then she goes and she never comes back. But she goes and like she catches a flight, across the world. And now she blocks you, and then everything is turned upside down. And he can never get a hold of her, and then he can never like reach out to her, and then all these things begin to escalate. And now all of a sudden she's thinking that she's not married anymore, and she wants to marry somebody else now. How often has this happened? How many brothers, subhanallah, have gone through something like that? And sometimes uh it's like, she got married with him and he married her, she married him, uh, and with the right principles. For example, they followed the Islamic path properly and they got married and everything was going good, but then she, for example, became involved with somebody else, let's say at work or on the internet, and then she runs away from her husband. One day she just gets up and leaves the house and leaves the kids and leaves the husband and goes to a different country and is with another man. That happens. That happens a lot, actually. Or yeah, it's something that happens. Uh, it's something that happens. It's not like, oh, this is a rare extreme case, etc. No, it happens. Subhanallah. So for every step that woman that is still judged as that man's wife, for example, that she left the house without his permission and she went to a different place, a different country, different state without his permission, and she refuses to come back. Every step that she takes is an enormous sin. Subhanallah. That is something difficult. That is something difficult. And so my advice to the women is just think about how, yeah, you might, and of course, we're not talking about an abusive relationship. We're not talking about like, if he gets his hands on her, like for example, we're not talking about like, she was a good wife and she was at home, but then the guy's a maniac or not a maniac, a psycho or like an abuser, and he, if the napkin isn't placed on the table in the right angle, he's gonna slap her, slap the teeth out of her mouth. So in that case, of course, she can run away because she has to do what she can in order to avoid the harm. Because here, he's not allowed to slap her, he's not allowed to beat her, he's not allowed to punch her, he's not allowed to like, throw her down on the floor and kick her. He's not allowed to do any of that. So um, if she can, let's say, avoid him hitting her by her leaving the premises and going somewhere, or for example, even calling someone who will protect her, like her brother or her uncle or her father or something like that, from the unjust violence, then in that case, she can do that. And so she can leave the house and she can go somewhere where he's not going to hit her and she could stay there, for example, because she fears for her life, etc. If the abuse is that drastic and if the abuse is that severe, she fears for her life because he beat her so badly that she almost died and then she recovered or whatever. She fears for her life. That guy, he's got anger issues. He's like a psychopath or someone that gets enraged, right? Maybe he is taking too much steroids because he wants to be in the gym and get muscle. And he's taking too much steroids. So he's got the roid rage. So she knows that if he gets in that mode, he might kill her. So she fears for her life. So she can leave in that case. In that case, she can leave. Right? In that case, she can run away because she fears for her life. So she is basically essentially avoiding something bad from happening by leaving there. But in the case where she's just, let's say, you know, let's say the husband, he doesn't satisfy her, or she is irritated or annoyed with like his personality, or she just doesn't like his face, right? And every time she looks at his face, she sees his face, she feels that burning sensation in her heart, like it stings her, and she just is completely repelled. She cannot run away. She cannot just leave and disappear. She cannot, run away with another man because that would be an enormous sin for each step that she takes. So may Allah protect us from such a thing. And the same judgment applies to, let's say, someone like a Muslim that he killed another Muslim unjustly, and he is subject to the eye for an eye rule. And so the family of that deceased Muslim, they want to execute the killer. He cannot run away. So he has to turn himself in. He cannot just run away. So that's what it means, such as prosecution. A debt, for example, if one Muslim owes another Muslim something, he cannot, let's say, run away and disappear so that he doesn't pay, which some people do nowadays, subhanAllah. Let's say uh, you make a deal with them, etc. They're gonna do something, and then, you do your part of the deal, and then when it comes to payment, they say they're gonna pay you, and then they stonewall you, and then they say, okay, we're gonna pay you, and then they never pay you, and then, once some time has passed, and like your patience has run out, and like you really need the money, etc., then you hit them up, and you call them, and you text them, and there's no response. And you call them, they don't answer. And you text them, they don't reply. So it's like they ghosted you. So this is like something similar to that, where they're, I guess, running away from their responsibility. Because basically all of it falls under the category of running away from fulfilling the obligatory right upon the person. It's something that's an obligation upon you to do. If you run away from it, it's a sin of the foot. Like the one who, let's say, he killed someone unjustly, and the family of the victim, they want to execute him. He has to turn himself in. He can't run away. For example, the husband who he's obligated to support his family, he can't just abandon them and leave them and not support them. The one who owes someone money, he can't just run away from them and not pay them. So there's many scenarios for this. Subhanallah, may Allah protect us. The next sin that we're going to mention is to strut arrogantly. So what does it mean to strut arrogantly? To strut arrogantly, it means to walk in an arrogant way. There is the certain type of walking that the arrogant people do, and it's an enormous sin. Um, when they walk, for example, they lift up their heads, they like extend their hands, and they look at their bodies. They look at their clothes, and they are, pleased and filled with conceit of themselves. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told us about a man in the previous nations from the Israelites, from the children of Israel, that he was walking in that arrogant way, and he was looking at himself in a conceited way. He was looking at his nice clothes, and he was looking at his nice hair. And as he was walking like that, Allah Ta'ala ordered the earth to swallow him. And so he is, and he falling through the earth until Judgment Day. And this incident, and Allah Ta'ala, he made it to be a lesson, like a lesson for others. SubhanAllah. And up until now, that person is falling. The next one is to step over people's shoulders except to fill a gap. So this is regarding the musalla or the masjid. How some people, they step over the shoulders of others. I think, for example, in the prayer line, so that everybody's sitting down. That person wants to go to a, a closer place to the front, so they step over people's shoulders. So if they do that and it harmed the person and harmed the people, like they say, he's walking over people's shoulders, and like he has his like bare foot like literally like slapping someone's face because he's trying to step over his shoulder. This is obviously harmful. This is annoying, irritating, etc. So this is not permissible to do. But if no harm or anything occurred, it would be disliked. And so this judgment is known because there was a man that he was stepping over the shoulders of people on Jumu'ah, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was on the minbar giving the speech, and he saw that man doing that, and he told them, "Sit because you have harmed." And he sit because then you've done something that harms the Muslims. And also the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Man takhatta رقاب المسلمين فقد اتخذ جسرا إلى جهنم." It means that the person, if he harms the Muslims as he's stepping over their shoulders, like by his foot hitting their ear or hitting their head or the like, then this is forbidden and this is a sin. Now, if the person was doing that and if he was stepping over the shoulders of people to fill a gap, right, to fill a gap in one of the prayer lines, then this is permissible because then those Muslims that left the gap, they're responsible for filling it. If they left it open, then the Muslim can go to it. And there's an exception to this judgment, which is the Imam, so that he can get to the front, so that he can lead the prayer, or so he can get to the minbar. He can go over people's shoulders, and it wouldn't be disliked if there was no other way that he could get to the front. If there's another way he could get to the front, and he did that, then it would be disliked. Then next we mentioned to pass in front of a person performing the prayer with a barrier in front of that person if the conditions of the sufficient barrier are fulfilled. So among the sins of the foot is walking between the person who's praying and between his valid barrier. And based on the madhab of the person who is praying. Like if that barrier is close to the person any less than 3 dirah, 3 cubits or less, um, and at least 2/3 of a cubit high. Otherwise, then if this person didn't have that, uh, then the place that he like whatever carpet or something that he put on the floor so he can pray on it, then that would be the barrier. And if he doesn't have any of that, then he would, like to say, mark a line towards the Qibla from his right side, not in front of him. If he doesn't have any of that, then it's not forbidden to walk in front of him. So if there's no barrier in front of the person who's praying, like let's say the person, uh, like he's praying in an open land, open field, or like a place that's open, and though even if he's inside of a building, but the walls are far away, there's no furniture near him. So that person is like praying like in the middle of an open room. So for example, in that case, you can walk in front of them because they don't have a barrier. But if the person, let's say, is praying, let's say in a building, and he's praying like let's say near a wall, you cannot walk in between him and the wall because he has the proper barrier in that case. Likewise, if they pray in a place that it is most likely used or mostly used to pass by during that time, um, then in that case, the person can walk in front of him. And if it's needed to walk in front of him, the person can walk in front of him. It's not forbidden. So it's only forbidden when the person has the proper barrier and he is in a place where it's not mostly used for people to pass by. So in the case where the Muslim has the barrier, if there was someone that was going to walk in front of him, it's sunnah for the one who is praying to stop the one who is trying to walk in between him and the barrier. So like by putting out his hand, for example. And if there is no barrier, then the Muslim who is praying, he has no right to prevent the one who is passing in front of him. As for passing between the lines of the Muslims who are praying, so if that was between two lines, or if there were between the two lines more than 3 cubits, then it's permissible. Otherwise, it is not permissible except for an excuse. So if there was a person praying and in front of him there was a person that was sitting, this person who was sitting is not considered a barrier for the one who is praying. Praying without a barrier is disliked. So either the one who is praying is going to be close to a wall, or he would, like, for example, bury something in the ground, or he would draw that line, or he would, for example, use his prayer rug. This would be enough. Likewise, it is a condition that the thing that he is using as a barrier, uh, or the length of his carpet, in order for it to be sufficient, it's a condition that its length is not more than 3 cubits. However, if there was between him and the end of the carpet 5 cubits or 6, then this is not the sunnah. And if he does not put a barrier, his reward would be lessened. So basically, for the barrier, if you're in a building, then you pray close to the wall, basically. Or let's say a pillar, if there was like pillars holding up the mosque or whatever, or the musalla, you pray near something that acts like a barrier. If there is no such thing as that, then you can place something in front of you. You could bury something into the ground, like a stick, or you say bring a chair, for example. You put it right to the right of you. That would be your barrier. If you don't have that, then you have, let's say, a prayer rug, like the standard prayer rug. Then you use that, and the edge of the prayer rug, anywhere that prayer rug ends, would be your barrier, so nobody would walk in front of you. If you don't have that, if you don't have the prayer rug, then you basically draw a line to the right of you. So it's a line that is parallel to you from the right side. You draw that line on the right side. That would be your barrier. And if you don't have any of that, then you pray as is. But when you're able to have a barrier and you pray without one, it's disliked. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. Uh, Actually, let's finish the last two. To extend the leg towards the holy book if it is not in a raised location. That's referring to the Quran. So it's forbidden to extend the foot towards the Quran if it is not in a raised location. What does that mean if it's not in a raised location? It means if the Quran is not in a raised location. Uh, because this is considered not having the proper etiquette towards the Quran. As for if the Quran was in a high location and the person was extending their foot, like they're sitting on the ground and they're extending their foot. When we say extending the foot, we mean the foot being completely straight and the soles of your feet, for example, like pointing in that direction. So if the Quran is at the same level as the soles of that person's foot, and it's not far away, it's close by, and that person, um, for example, there's no barrier between him and the Quran, and the Quran is not raised up, then this is an enormous sin. But if the Quran was raised up, then it's not forbidden. Likewise, if the Quran was far away, it's not forbidden. Um, because, like we said, remember the Quran has to be honest. Now, of course, if the person extends their foot towards the Quran with the intention of belittling, then that is blasphemy, of course. But here we're talking about just the person, and he's sitting and his foot is extended, and the Quran is, let's say, not far away, and it's not raised up, and it's not like behind a barrier. In that case, it's forbidden. And it's blasphemy to write the words of the Quran with filth. Some people they do that because they are ignorant. They didn't follow the proper process of learning, and they read in some books, which is completely false. They read in some books that if you write Al-Fatiha with urine, that it will cure you. This is straight up blasphemy. And how could someone um, think that they would be cured by that? Also, it's forbidden to turn the pages of the Mus'haf of the Quran with a finger that is wet with or moist with saliva. So the person and like we mentioned, knowledge is important, and for the person to learn before they do. So it's definitely forbidden to, for example, like lick your finger and have the moisture of your saliva on the finger, and then use that to turn the pages of the Quran. This is definitely forbidden. What would be blasphemous is if the person like has like accumulated saliva and they put that on the Quran, then that would be blasphemous. And the last thing is every walking to commit a sin or avoid an obligation. So if it's time to pray and the person is walking away from what he needs to do in order to pray, then he commits a sin with each step. If like we mentioned earlier, the person who's walking towards the bar or walking to kill another Muslim, every step that he takes towards that is a sin. Um, or he's walking to, let's say, steal somebody's money, or he's walking to fornicate or to do any sin. For every step that he takes, he commits a sin. So really, the Muslims should be conscious of each step that they are taking, and Allah Ta'ala knows best. Now we reach to the sins of the body, which is the last chapter of the sins, and inshallah, after that will be the chapter of repentance, and then we'll finish the book. And Alhamdulillah, has been a wonderful journey. I hope that uh, whoever has not taken this knowledge has taken it, and whoever has taken it has reviewed it and benefited from it. If there are no questions, we'll conclude. Oh, there's a lot of questions. Um, so basically, the way that it is, the way that it's considered forbidden, like that you're pointing your foot towards the mushaf, is if you have it extended. Um, like just imagine a person like sitting on the floor with their foot extended straight out. Uh, and so the soles of their foot would be pointing towards the mushaf. So this is what is forbidden. Then it says here, if a small child passes between a praying person and a barrier, does this person stop the child with hands as well? Yes, with his hands or with whatever. And he stops him just because as an adult, we're supposed to, and we know that the children are unaccountable, but we're supposed to like stop them from doing things that are sinful. So even though they don't get a sin, we're responsible for stopping them from doing things that are not permissible. Then the question here, if for the Muslim who killed the person unjustly, if he runs away instead of turning himself in, is it sinful for the family of the person who was murdered unjustly to look for him and execute him? Oh, that's a good question. That is a very good question. I'll ask, because the judgment that we know is that if there is no infrastructure, like there's no caliph, then we're not allowed to take the judgment into our own hands. Uh, it says here, I've seen people use the Quran to see if a cat steps on it or not. Is this on the same category as sinful? And it should not be done for sure. It should not be done for sure, because and you cannot um and they put the Quran in a situation where the cat might step on it. You have to um protect the Quran. Um, wafikum. So yeah, someone let's say is sitting Indian style, and for example, like the sole of their foot happens to be like the positioning of it happens to be like, let's say, towards the Quran. This is not sinful. It's when the person extends their foot out towards the Quran, like if they're sitting, um, if they're sitting with their foot extended. Not if they're like, let's say they're sitting Indian style, um or let's say sometimes the person, like let's say they're sitting the way that is sunnah to sit in the prayer, like when you're making the first tashahhud, and you would have like the sole of your foot like pointing backwards. So that also is not that's not it's not considered extending the foot towards the Quran. No, because the Shaykh says maddur rijli, and the Shaykh says here, um, to extend the leg towards the holy book of the Quran. If somebody's sitting Indian style, are they extending their leg? Subhanallah, I don't understand this. Why someone would say that? Anyways, uh, barakallahu fikum. Are there any other questions? طيب، نهلل لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم